Namaskar and welcome to Sunset Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you details of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Now, Russia has sought immediate talks to secure clear legal agreements that NATO will not expand eastwards. This was conveyed by Russian President Vladimir Putin to UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Monday. This, in fact, came a day after G7 foreign ministers and EU representative issued a statement condemning Russia's military buildup and aggressive rhetoric towards Ukraine. A buildup of Russian military troops along Ukraine and Russia's shared 1,200-mile border has raised the tensions in the area. Ukraine and Russia share hundreds of years of cultural, linguistic and familial links. As part of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was the second most powerful Soviet republic after Russia and was crucial strategically, economically and culturally. Ever since Ukraine split from the Soviet Union, both Russia and the West have vied for a greater influence in the country in order to keep the balance of power in the region in their favor. In today's episode, we will discuss all aspects of this conflict, and for more in this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you. Beginning with, we have with us Alexandra Zubenko. She's joining us from Moscow. She's a research fellow at PIR Center in Moscow there. Welcome, Alexandra. We are also joined by Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, former ambassador, and Professor Swan Singh is also joining us, the chairperson of Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament at JNU. Welcome to you as well, Professor Singh. And let me begin right away with you, Professor Swan Singh. Let's first start by understanding the genesis of this conflict, or the reasons behind this current conflict, a bit deeper into it. I just gave the the recent information, but what is exactly behind this ongoing tension between Russia and Ukraine? Almost a decade now, but the tensions are again going up the curve.
Thank you, Vishal, for asking this question, because the baggage which is defining as to how each side is so reticent or paranoid, either way you want to look at it, needs to be underlined. So this, in a very quick fashion, could be seen as a story of about at least 3 decades of NATO's expansion eastwards after collapse of Soviet Union, where it has moved as much as about 600 miles east. And what is interesting is that about 3 former Soviet republics, which are Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and 4 other Warsaw Pact members, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia, have joined NATO. So one can understand the fear and concern that Russia has had of this constant forward eastward movement of NATO. And now the recent engagement with Ukraine. Ukraine, as you understand, is already building 2 naval bases under a defense deal with the United Kingdom. It is receiving advanced technologies like drones from NATO member Turkey. In fact, on 6th of December only, President Zelensky announced that they are going to go forward and have a co-production of these combat drones. So it's a constant, sort of penetration, as Russians would like to call, of NATO into Ukraine, which is making President Zelensky increasingly reluctant to even implement the agreement of 2015, which is called Minsk II agreement, where President had agreed to speak to the 2 so-called republics in eastern Ukraine, which are Russian-dominated. So it's a very complex web of ongoing sort of tensions, where Russia has put in very quickly, let me say, 3 fundamental red lines today, which means that there is no question of Ukraine joining NATO. There is no question of NATO forces or bases being established in Ukraine. And third one is there is no forward new deployments of dangerous technologies on Russian border. So it's the baggage, as I would like to call it, which is really making it difficult. But Russia has clarified they don't want a war, despite prepondering advantage that they have over Ukraine from 3 sides. They fundamentally, as you opened the program, want an international agreement that NATO will not be moving any further forward east.
Okay. Ambassador Trigunayat, your views there, and as has been pointed out by Professor Swan Singh, Russia has clearly outlined, its red lines for the West not to cross vis-a-vis Ukraine. And the Western viewpoint or the NATO's viewpoint, the members of the NATO, their views on this are also pretty much out there in open.
I fully agree and concur with what Professor Singh has said. These are definitely the Russian red lines, and Russia has been always concerned about its security with this NATO's outward expansion or eastward expansion in that sense. And it has been always talking until recently. NATO and Russia used to have a dialogue that has been suspended for some time now, but Russia was not being heard. And now, in addition to that, you can also add, because Russia is a Eurasian nation, but is always more identified with Europe. And therefore, its relationship with many European countries, the big ones, has been quite very much existent there and has been working closely. Large number of European companies have been working in. But if you look at this, that the one of the major thing today is the pipeline project Nord Stream 2. And I think that is the geoeconomics of it, is what is today pressurizing the Russians into this situation.
Okay.
That the Europeans, the Americans were not listening to Russia. And therefore, this is one way of conveying the message that we will not allow you to steamroll into our territory and create a security situation. And it's genuinely concerned. I mean, if you were to really want to understand what is the history between Ukraine and Russia and Belarus is, the President Putin has written a big paper in 2020 July, I think. And it is an amazing historical religious connect among these three countries. And so whenever this is a part of the geopolitics and the geoeconomics in both sense, because most of the Russian oil and gas has been passing through Ukraine now. Now questions, and this is what America today has become a major global player as far as the oil and gas is concerned, and it wants to have the European market as well. They have been pressuring Germany not to go ahead with it. So it's going on. So that is something I look at it, that the Russians are feeling that, and that to convey that message this is doing. As President Putin has said that he's not planning to go into Ukraine, and I think one would have to accept it on the face value of it.
Okay.
But they are only at a short notice. That's why there's the troops there.
Okay. That's a very interesting point you made about the geoeconomics as well. I'll come to that a bit later. But Alexandra, I'd like to bring you in here. And, as both our panelists are pointing out, vis-a-vis Russia's red lines on Ukraine, they're quite clear. But if we look at it from another perspective, one sovereign country cannot stop the other sovereign country from joining an Alliance A or Alliance B. This is what Ukraine's and NATO's stand is.
You're partly right there, but if you want to reach compromise in international relations, you probably should express your red lines and then just look if the other side will comply to it or not. Russia had such guarantees from NATO in 1990s, but they were breached, and the Professor Swarenstein said that NATO now is present in many Eastern European countries. And I can add there that President Putin is really concerned about strike systems, the possibility of strike systems being located in Ukraine. And he said that they're probably if we, for example, put M41 strike systems in Ukraine, the flight time to Moscow will be 5-7 minutes. And of course, it's you can say that there is an issue of sovereignty, of Ukraine's sovereignty. But on the other hand, it's an issue of Russian security. And that's the main thing.
Okay. So security concerns are the topmost as far as Russia is concerned. Professor Singh, looking at the geoeconomic aspect, something which Ambassador Srigunayat mentioned, that also seemed to be one of the major reasons for these heightened tensions in this part of the world. Obviously, for Russia, security is a big issue. For Ukraine, it's the territorial integrity. West would, or NATO would always want to go a bit deeper into this territory, to the extent possible. But energy security and the energy resources also play a major part here, something which perhaps also might lead to some of the European nations, not speaking in a singular united tone.
Exactly. I think that is an important point we need to underline. Other than defense exports, it's the energy export that has been the foreign exchange earner as far as Russia is concerned. And other than China that buys an enormous amount of energy from Russia, European nations, if you remember, actually in early 1990s, quite in defiance of United States, they had moved forward in building that network of energy pipelines. And the latest one, as Ambassador just mentioned, the Nord Stream 2 is something which is a major project. And therefore, I think one has to underline the interdependence on both sides. Though there are insinuations, especially from Berlin, that they hold this unusual card of blocking this Nord Stream 2. But European countries would also be dependent. In fact, that is the reason why President Putin is repeatedly saying that he doesn't want to singularly negotiate with President Joe Biden, but would like to see some of the European members of NATO also sit on that table where these guarantees are given. And I agree with Alexandra saying, Russia has repeatedly said such promises were made to Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev was promised that not an inch of further eastward expansion of NATO would happen, but because that never came in writing in an international agreement, therefore today Putin doesn't want to limit the negotiations only to United States, whereas United States sees it as if it's a bilateral negotiation and they are going to almost arbitrate in that situation, which is not how the reality is. And that, I think, energy connect of Europe, particularly East European countries, which are also today part of NATO, are also very, very conscious of how these negotiations will go forward.
Okay.
They are indeed very reluctant. They want to go very incrementally on these issues. So definitely the economic connect, and particularly my last point in just 10 seconds.
Please
Now,
carry on, Professor Singh.
Post-pandemic, you see all these countries have been hard hit by deceleration of economic growth, and they're all desperately looking at resilience in economic growth. And in any situation, the kind of economic models that the world today follows, energy is the main driver of any economic resilience. And Russia holds that key in that sense. So one has to appreciate the complex relationship, economic relationship, that Russia over time has tried to build with European nations. And I think that will also account as to how far they will really be able to accommodate Russia. Russia, as we understand, has very friendly Belarus on the north, Crimea on the south. Russia today has about almost 1 million strong armed forces compared to only 200,000 of Ukraine. So in that sense, also sustainability of just forward deployment, if not war, just to tire out each other. Russia stands a clear advantage. And in that sense, it has certain strengths of its own. And therefore, I think somewhere they'll have to find whether reassurances, whether certain concessions will work in this case of Russia relenting on this forward deployment. But I think all various contours of very complex relationship that Russia has built over time with Europe is interesting way to look at it. It's not just simply East-West Warsaw Pact versus NATO relationship that used to be in Cold War years. It's a very different relationship today.
Indeed. Now there are various added, angles to this particular complex issue. They are, brewing up tensions between both the nations, Ukraine and Russia. Ambassador Tribhunath, looking at it from Ukraine's perspective as well, we would like to understand. Of course, as Alexandra pointed out, for Russia, security is topmost. But from Ukraine's point of view, it's a question of its territorial integrity, one, and its sovereignty, two. And, it's its freedom to go ahead and, have its own independent foreign policy. These are the points which are time and again been made by the Ukrainian government.
Well, you are right, absolutely. I mean, from Kyiv's perspective, it is also important that their own security is assured somehow, and that is what they are seeking, security through NATO. because the problem, in the region is that once the Soviet Union split up, then obviously it was a design and a project of the West to see to it that the Soviets no longer that powerful to counter them. But Russia was also very weak at the time, but then it has over time regained its power in that sense. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, Ukraine has a strategic possibility. What Russia has been wanting with the Ukrainian leadership is to coexist in a brotherly manner for a long time now.
Alexandra, meanwhile, one major issue here is that given the stand which has been taken by all stakeholders here, starting from Russia to Ukraine to NATO countries and other stakeholders as well, what is the way out of this conflict situation? Of course, President Putin has made it clear time and again that Russia doesn't want war, but the escalation of tensions at the border are not doing any good to either Russia or Ukraine or other stakeholders as well.
Yeah, that's it. You're absolutely right here. But I think the problem is that the solution of the conflicts to decrease tensions, we need to return to Minsk agreements, and that's what Ukraine, Russia is accusing Ukraine of not complying with the Minsk agreements and with reaching peace in the DNR and LNR. So for Russia, it's of course the security in eastern Ukraine, which borders with Russia, is the main issue. And if Ukraine doesn't comply with these conditions, of course, Russia will show the signs, military signs, in order to provoke the right reaction, so to say, from the Ukrainian government, in order to draw these red lines, And I also wanted to add, when you said about this independence and sovereignty joining NATO, that if Ukraine decided to develop its just its own offensive systems, we could have talked with Ukraine directly. But now Ukraine is deciding on deploying NATO systems on its territory, and it's unclear who is responsible for it. Ukraine, it's not an independent policy to deploy the weapons of some other country, to say it's roughly, on your territory.
Okay.
And
Okay. That seemingly is the major, issue of contention there. Again, Mr. Tirgunath, you're back with us. You're making a point there. In addition to that, if you might also add your perspective or your viewpoint on the way out of this crisis situation.
I think the way out is that it's already happening to some extent. Like President Biden spoke to President Zelensky, and they briefed him about the thing, and they are also discussing exactly how the Minsk II process can move forward, and to what extent can Ukraine accommodate its own people. I mean, so to say, in the eastern Russia. What happens in the eastern part of Russia is all Russian-speaking people, so that's why Russia feels invested in that region. Crimea, I always knew that it was extremely strategically important for Russia. Mm-hmm. So Crimea is a gone thing. I mean, there is no point talking about it anymore. Nobody will talk. And this has happened to all major powers. They do what they want to do, and they get scot-free despite whatever international law obligations are. But I believe that to start with, and it seems like the set of consequences and this, that. But this will, if they continue on the same path of increasing, intervention in the region and trying to use not force, but at least talk, because Biden has clearly said that they will not come to defend Ukraine. So Ukraine is also in a bit of a spot in that sense. So we have to see that if the best course of action is negotiation, and I guess President Putin may have told even the Indians about this, that they are not interested in escalating it further, because this will not be good for either country.
Okay. 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 Let me bring in Professor Swan Singh there as well. Professor Singh, from your viewpoint, looking at it from a holistic perspective in terms of the solutions, the probable solutions to this crisis. Of course, Russia is, asking for Ukraine to, abide by the Minsk agreement and come back to it. Something which the other stakeholders might also be amenable to.
First of all, Ukraine has enormous challenges within. For example, President Putin, as Ambassador was saying, had advised President Zelensky to implement Minsk II. But apparently, he's not able to do that if he wants to be re-elected. There's a whole strong nationalist forces inside. They want to build a unitary Ukraine, which was originally, when it came out of Soviet Union, it was a patchwork of various territories. And we have seen these territories in one part of East, which is declaring itself autonomous. But let me underline, if you see history of international relations, despite being the second most powerful country, as you mentioned in the opening, it can be made a scapegoat to relationship between Russia and United States. Despite the fact that both European Union foreign ministers meeting in Brussels and Liverpool meeting of G7 have come out with very aggressive stances against Russia, saying severe sanctions, quote unquote, other means, etc. But fundamentally, relationship will be decided. What happens to Ukraine will be decided between what happens between the United States and Russia. Mm-hmm. And let me underline, United States' fundamental headache today or challenge today is not Russia, it's China.
Okay.
And therefore, Joe Biden will not like to push Russia beyond a point where it sort of goes all the way into the fold of Chinese and starts kowtowing exactly the Chinese line over a period of time. So United States has its own limitations in how far it can push Russia. European states have their own engagement with Russia also. In Ukraine, President Zelensky has its own limitations of seeking re-election. Okay. So I think it's going to continuously grow piecemeal, and I think it will kind of drift gradually in terms of minimal concessions on both sides. And I don't see any either fundamental written guarantees being given from NATO side to Russia that they will not move an inch beyond what they have moved now. Those incremental returns will continue over a period of time. But they will, over time, I think, find a way of marginalizing some of these tensions.
Okay. So there are a lot of complexities involved, both domestically and internationally, from geopolitical as well as geoeconomic perspective. Thank you so much, Professor Swan Singh, for my Mr. Anil Trigunath as well, and Alexandra Zubenko for your views and insights as well, coming in straight from Moscow there. As our experts were pointing out, there seems to be a lot of ways to reach, a solution, an amenable solution, which is acceptable to all the stakeholders on this issue. But that might take some time. And of course, diplomacy and dialogue is the way out for such crisis. We'll have to keep, a close watch on the developments there, and we'll come back again with more details. Till then, keep watching Sunset Television. Thank you.